Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year! Welcome back to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Today's topic I wanted to talk about, I say it all the time, stay off the air gates. How many times have I said that? It's probably a lot. I don't know how many times it is, but it's been a while, right? So I always say stay off the air gates. And although there's a lot of people in here, it's like, well, yeah, stay off the air gates, and that's a common thing, I understand. But there's actually a handful of people, believe it or not, that contact me and say, hey, what do you actually mean when you mean stay off the air gates? What are you actually referring to? And I'm not sure if they're being sarcastic or not, but we're going to talk about it today. So let's talk about why we're going to stay off the air gates.
Now get ready. Here we go.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. Happy New Year. If you're not watching this right now, if you're watching this later on, then it was New Year's when I recorded this. So happy late New Year for you. Or maybe it's coming close to 4th of July or something like that. Or maybe it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. Did you forget to buy somebody a Valentine's Day gift? You might want to go out and do that really quick. Or maybe it's right before your anniversary. Ooh, you still want to go buy a gift. Ungifted's not good, so make sure you go do that. It's not a good thing. So I wanted to talk about staying off the air gates. I say it all the time, stay off the air gates. But why do we stay off the air gates? There's actually a lot of reasons why we want to stay off the air gates. Some of them are pretty apparent. Some of them are like, duh. Some of them not so much. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit from the operations point of view. I'm going to talk about it a little bit from the rides point of view. So let's talk about first the operational point of view. When it comes to a queue line full of people up in the station, you want to make sure that everyone is orderly and not being out of control. Because one thing that does is that ups the amount of injuries that you could have in line. Yeah, tons of rides get shut down all the time because people get seriously injured. And it's not the ride that does it. It's actually the things they do in the queue line. I've gone over some of this stuff before in like my Guest 101 video that I made. I think that was like one of my second or third videos of the channel. It was way a long time ago. But so one of the biggest things, the way guests get injured is the first one is mainly they don't drink enough water and they get heat exhaustion, and then they fall down in the line. So operations can't run the ride, and they don't want people trampling each other, so they shut the ride down while the medical emergency is taken care of in the queue line. Now, one of the other things that happens all the time is people sit on those lovely queue line handrails. You know, the speed rails that line the queue line? People sit on top of those all the time. Now, it's one thing if you're a big guy, girl, whatever, my size, and I'm just leaning up against those queue lines. That's one thing in particular. There's a good chance I'm probably not going to fall over from just leaning up against it. But I'm talking about lots of little kids and some bigger kids. They fully sit on top of them with their feet dangling, or maybe they put their feet up on the mid-rail so they have their feet on the mid-rail and their butt on the top rail. These kids really easily can fall backwards, and it doesn't take much with a queue line full of moving people on both sides, and then their buddies start messing around with them. It doesn't take much to fall backwards, and if you fall off those things, you get injured pretty bad. You could slide down, land your head straight on the concrete, or you can slide backwards and catch with your knees, and then that mid-rail on a lot of people would hit right there in the back of the neck, right in the area that's, life-ending, that particular area. So we want to stay away from that. So it's one of the reasons to keep people off of queue line rails in general. Okay, so that being said, we move up to the air gates on top. We have those exact same hazards in the station, but we've added an additional hazard with the air gates now. Does anybody know what that additional hazard is? How about you and back right over there? No, that was a dumb answer. Don't say that again. Anyways, the additional hazard that we have added now is the fact that on the other side of those air gates, we now have a 10 to 18 ton vehicle moving, sometimes at a rapid rate of speed out of there. So what's that mean? So in a queue line, if you decide to fall over to one side, well, you're going to hit one person in line. If you fall over on the other side, you might hit another person in that particular side of the line. But on air gates, if you fall over one side, you're going to hit somebody in line right behind you. If you fall over on the other side, you could actually fall into the vehicle path and get what we like to call mechanically separated. Right, that's where the vehicle runs over you. So people are like, oh, no. 10 to 18 tons of movement on that side. Those motors, those drive systems, everything that moves those vehicles in and out of the station does not care about a person that got in the way. It doesn't. If I'm standing in the track and a train comes in, even at a slow crawl speed of a ride where it's got a very easy homing process coming into there, that train will literally rip me in half without even bogging a motor down. Like, you won't even see an amperage spike in the motors once it officially tears a person in half. It's not a good thing to do. Even worse, you could get caught into the train, which means that you would be going out along with it. So you wouldn't just be cut in half, you would be drug across however much the track it is until the vehicle can stop. So think about that. So that's not a good thing. Hazards falling to one side and then the train going to the other side. That's pretty much, I'm going to say, the operational end of it. It's mainly people just getting hurt and then possibly falling into ride vehicle paths. That's the thing that the operations needs to be very vigilant about and making sure, okay, no one's sitting on those things, no one's doing anything like that. And then the second side of it is where we get into the maintenance side of things. This is where we really say, hey, stop leaning on the air gates. Well, there's a reason for that as well. So I took this really short video of the underside of the air gates working just because I could. It was on the bottom side of the station, you know, where a lot of queue lines are. And you could look up and you could see the queue line components working. So I took this small little video. So that video I mainly took to show that when the rods came closed, it was making a proximity sensor. The way most air gates are set up is that there's an actuator on one side, which is typically a pneumatic actuator, and then the tie rods are daisy chained all the way down. Again, when I go over this stuff on videos, I'm talking very generalized. There's tons of manufacturers that have built customized station components, and tons of parks have built the same thing. I can't go into all of them, nor do I really know what every single park did. Again, every ride is installed different, every ride operates different, every park installs the ride according to what they want, and every park operates the ride according to what they want. So you can't say one really blanket, like this is an exact thing how everything is done. Even if I was still working at my park and I could show you like this is exactly how we do it, I could post that video and then a bunch of people will pop up and say that's not how that ride installed at our park works or does that either. So it really is kind of a wild card. So again, on these videos I go over generalized, kind of not so much exact, more vague concepts, because you have to fill them in according to where you are and what you're doing. So underneath the station, the air gates are linked together by lots of these guys. These are rod ends, typically referred to as rod ends, or hemispherical ball joints. What they are is they allow linked movement. So in this case, we would take the air gate, which has an arm on it, and at the end of the arm, we would run a bolt through a hole, which goes through this guy. Now, this guy, we are going to connect him to an air cylinder. And then as the gates are told to open, the air cylinder pushes the rod that way. Makes typically a 90-degree swing radius, which causes your gates to open up where you are. And then when we say close, we take this guy and pull him back, and it closes backwards, so the gate's shut. Now, what most parks do, again, this is not, I'm not saying every single park, but what a lot of parks do is they do this to, let's say, gate number 8 or gate number 1, somewhere down there, a lot of times, 8 or 1. And then on top of this guy, which is like sitting there like this attached to that cylinder, they take another one and they come from this side and they go on top of it like that. And then that goes that way to gate number, the next one, whatever it is, 7 or number 2. And then there it does the same thing. It shows up on that gate, leaves that one, goes to 6 or 3. And they do that times all of them. They go all the way down. So what you have is you have one air cylinder pushing on 8 of these linking bars, typically 8, right? So you push on 8 of these linking bars all the way down. And at the other end, for safety, there's typically a proximity sensor installed that when this last link gets to the closed position, that sensor goes high. So I'll bring out this little guy. Remember, this is my proximity sensor from one of my other videos. Not hooked up right now. But anyways, when this guy closes and it gets into the full closed position, this goes over that proximity sensor and makes that sensor go high. And then when that jumps up high, that tells the input to the PLC that the air gates are now closed. So that's what it's doing. Typically, a lot of times, but not every time, trust me, this is more of an expensive thing, back at the other end where that first air cylinder was hooked on, it also has another proximity sensor there. And that is reading the gate in the closed position. But then, when that retracts into the open position, there's another proximity sensor saying that the gate is now open. Okay, so now we have 3 sensors. 2 that monitor the closed position, 1 that monitors the open position. And the 2 that monitor the closed position, if I was installing it, again, not every ride is done like this. If I was installing it, I would use both the normally open and the normally closed signal from this guy. So I know that my proximity sensor didn't fail along the way. I see it change state when I command the gates to open and close. Okay, so why don't we want people mechanically leaning on the air gates? When I take that 90-degree arm, right, and it's linked up like this, and then I take it and we move it open and closed. This is a lever and a fulcrum, right? I'm taking this guy and pushing it this way, and then I'm using air pressure and pulling it back that way. I need air pressure from the system to move that cylinder to the open and closed position. I can only put so much air pressure in that cylinder, and it's pushing against a big piston. So a lot of Q lines. Let's see, the last one I did, I used a 3-inch air cylinder with about 120 psi going into it, roughly. So let's see, what is that? This is where we math. Okay, so the surface area of a circle, if you remember back in the school, the surface area is pi r squared. So 3.1417 whatever times the radius squared. In this case, our radius was 1.5 inches. I can't do that math in my head, so I have to calculate it. So when I do that, the surface area of that cylinder comes out to basically 7 square inches on that piston. From there, we're going to multiply that times the air pressure that's coming into the cylinder. So air pressure in times the surface area. So we're going to use 120 psi. and that gives us, there we go, 848 psi. So that's 848 psi that was pushing on that entire air gate assembly. But when you push on the air gates and you lean on them, you start putting pressure back against that pneumatic ram. How much pressure can you put on the air gate to push that ram back in? Well, probably not 848 psi worth. Now granted, the lever arm that hooks up to this guy underneath is on average, they're about 8 inches long from the center of the air gates to where this guy would mount up. They're about 8 inches long, somewhere in that general area. Again, no standards here. This is just whatever the park happened to buy. It's whatever was on sale at the time. That would be really hard to get that 848 psi to overcome that cylinder and start pushing it backwards. But you're not pushing against 8 inches, are you? You're pushing against... That is totally what she said. Oh well. You're pushing against the width of that air gate. So the air gate can be, 32 inches wide? Somewhere around there. And you can go all the way to the far corner of that and push on that with your body weight. Are you going to push over that 848 psi or 848 pounds per square inch on that cylinder? Probably not. That's still going to hold you. But you're putting stress on that assembly. So what's that matter? Well, that's one person in one row. What about 2 people? They start putting more pressure on that cylinder. 3 people? Even more. 4? Even more. 5? 6? Now you've overcome that cylinder. Yeah, you can overcome that cylinder and push those air gates back open. But what are we looking for? Back there at the farthest side away from the cylinder, right? Proximity sensor and rod end. The whole time that everyone's pushing on those gates, it's moving this further away from being triggered. And the instant that guy comes off the proximity sensor, which again, all the gates are still going to appear shut. It doesn't even look like they're moving, in fact, but all that slop adds up at the end, and you have now pulled that last one off of that proximity sensor. What happens then? The ride gets a fault. Pretty critical fault also, because it's not a simple little thing like, oh yeah, your air gates are open, just close the air gates. Some rides, it is. Some rides, it's just a warning light or an indicator light. A lot of rides that have a smart PLC inside of it that are running through lots of fault logic and code, they're going to watch that proximity sensor open up for the air gates, and they're going to e-stop the ride. Because they're like, it's now like, whoa, we, the ride, we officially don't know where anybody is in the station anymore. The ride vehicle area has been compromised. So when that gate is commanded to shut, now a lot of times there's a flip side to that coin. So a lot of times when the air gate's shut and the vehicle hasn't gone anywhere, right? They're just checking restraints and going down the vehicle and doing their normal pre-check. You could force that gate open. It will give you an air, but it probably won't shut down the ride. But if that vehicle starts to move, everyone's in their spots and they've started to move that vehicle, either in or out of the station, whatever it is, and there's movement happening, and then you open that air gates, most of the time it will critical e-stop and shut the ride down. Because they now said, hey, we don't know where people are in the station anymore. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know if people have jumped over and now they're just all over the place, but we don't understand this. So the ride faults. And a lot of times it's not a simple recovery. Anytime you get faults inside the station, they are typically not simple recoveries because the vehicle is now out of position in a lot of cases. And maintenance sometimes has a really hard time clearing it up, have to switch it in the manual, manually move vehicles out, maybe move vehicles back in to get those particular faults reset. And it is a mark on the crew that's operating the ride, because maintenance goes up there, put the keys in the ride, turn it over and say, what's happened? And they go, oh, it's an air gate's fault. Well, I don't typically start, well, I need to get underneath the ride and I need to check that proximity sensor and make sure it's tight and secured and that everything is within distance and all the linkage is correct. I go, really? This is how we're going to do it? Because a lot of times when it says airgate's fault, I look back over on the other side of the station or this side of the station where everyone is, and everyone's leaning over the air gates, pushing on them, doing all sorts of stuff, and nobody said anything to people. So I'm just like, you need to control those people better, because that is not an acceptable thing to do up in the ride station. What can operations do? They tell you to get off the air gates, tell you to stay off the air gates, right? If you continually do it, or if they have to repeat it multiple times, they can easily call security up there and have the people in question ejected from the park, because they're not following, most parks put down ride rules and park rules. And one of the rules is typically to follow the rules. So if the operator says stay off the air gates and you continue to do it, you're not following the rules, are you? That's one thing from the maintenance side of things. You can override the pneumatic ram and push the gates back open. So I hope you're enjoying this video on air gates and stuff like that. I did want to say, if you haven't subscribed already, please think about subscribing. I do appreciate everyone that does, and it helps the channel grow. I've got a good start. I mean, I'm at like 3,600 subscribers, and I'm on my way to, let's see, I want to get to 1.6 billion. So please subscribe, because I need help to get up to 1.6 billion. Also, if you want to contact me, let me know. You can always comment on the video. I typically respond to most comments, unless they're very vague and like off-putting, then I typically don't. But my viewers honestly don't have that problem with my viewers. Everyone's pretty straightforward in their comments. But if you also want to, you can contact me by email. If it's not something you want to put in the comments, you can email me at ryantheridemechanic@yahoo.com, and I'll respond to you on there pretty much as well too. So like and subscribe. Let me know how things are going. If you have any topics for future videos, let me know that as well too. Now, there are plenty of ride systems out there where people designed smart air gates. So there's a couple of ways to do that. Like the last one I did, I used multiple valves and throttling assemblies underneath the station to close the air gates. So what I did is I used 40 psi to close the gates, so they closed nice and slow. And during that time, anyone can stop the air gate and push it back open. And the reason for that is I've seen plenty of people get their knee and stuff like that caught inside the air gates, because they're standing there not paying attention. The knee is on the side of the stationary pole, and they're just sitting there relaxed. They're just waiting in line, and they got their knee out, and they don't understand it's on the pole, and then the air gate comes and closes right on their knee. And so that's an important one that I've said. I was like, okay, I've seen that happen multiple times to people. So I wanted to make sure when it was closing, I did it on low pressure to make sure it was very easy. Almost anybody in that queue line could just reach out and stop those air gates and push them back open. I don't fault the ride or anything for that. I'm just like, okay, it's good. Just let them open back up. No big deal. Because I wanted that ability. And then once those gates, exact same gates, registered in the closed position, I waited half a second, I think it was. We put a little bit of a debounce timer in there. I don't quite remember what it was though. Waited a little bit of time and then told the air cylinder to go to high pressure. And that was 150 psi on a 4-inch piston. So had some pretty good squeeze to it. So once that was closed, it was nice and soft, close, close, close. And then once it stopped, it waited just a second, and then it went high pressure for holding. And I said, okay, we really have to hold those things shut. So then you can move into interlocks. All right, so we've got 150 psi holding a 4-inch piston shut. And then each air gate underneath, I could take it on the arm and mount an electric latch. Basically what these are is it's an electromagnet with a striker plate essentially in front of it. And when those two get together, you turn the magnet on and it creates a bond that takes an extra 600 to 1200 pounds of pressure to break that bond. And those would be a safety. We say, well, that is a safety, but it's not a great safety. Well, that sounds like a pretty good safety. Why is it not a great safety? Because they require electricity to stay latched. So you could not use that as a primary latch because you can't guarantee that there's always going to be electricity. You could put it on a UPS and do things like that, but basically you have to accommodate for a power failure that's going to happen in the park. In which case, insurance companies don't like that because there's no mechanical backup at that point in time. The gate just goes and opens. So they don't like that. So we like mechanical latches. The first time I saw a really nice mechanical latch was on a GCI wooden coaster. They did a really nice job at it. The air gates moved nice and slow, open and closed, and they did it in such a fashion to where when it came back closed, the air cylinder that was extended past and cam locked itself into place. So that even when the ride lost air pressure, when the ride lost power, you could push on those gates as hard as you wanted to because that cam was still locking everything into place and it couldn't open up. And it wasn't like a very small little movement like, oh, okay, you just kind of jingle that into place and then you can unlock it. Nope. When you hit the unlock, that cam, that follower had to come back like a full 15 inches, long ways, before it finally opened and let the rest of the air gates open up, and then the air cylinder started to assist after that. Pretty cool timing. GCI did a lot of stuff on theirs. They had a lot of complex working components on their vehicles and with their ride and stuff. Those air gates were supplied by the ride manufacturer, so that was from GCI. One of the things I always thought was interesting was that on the GCI trains, the restraints, when the restraint came down, I was always a big guy, so it'd come down, and as soon as it got to my lap, it would go click one time. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem very safe, does it? But in the restraint box for the GCIs, there is actually an indexing cam that's designed to release right at that point. So as the restraint closed down, it's holding all the paws open until it got past that indexing cam point, and then the cam dropped out, and then all the paws would go down and go click, one. So it sounded like one click to the guests, but inside that restraint box, it's already had, I think it's already passed 12 teeth, I want to say, six on each ratchet as it passed by. So the same spot to where it was on my lap was already going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then the one that actually I heard is actually number 13. GCI did some pretty cool stuff with their trains, their Millennium Flyers. I liked them a lot. Kind of sad to see those things go when we got rid of them, but all for the better, I guess. Then we moved on to some other ride. Let's move on to another ride, a boomerang. Boomerangs are great in the station. Vekoma did a really awesome job with fully safe air gates. They're really cool. So theirs is a mechanical T assembly. And the way they work is that the arms come out and they stick in one spot. And then they have two little 90-degree bars that come out right next to each other and turn down. And they sit like this. So when you try to push the air gates open, they sit there and mechanically hit each other. And they prevent the gates from opening. They're mechanically bound. You cannot open those air gates. You can't push past them. You can't do anything. It's not until down there where the bottom of the T is like this, till you grab that with the air cylinder and pull that T down, and then the whole assembly starts to rotate and the gates open up. So really cool feature on those is because once a pneumatic ram extends and those little elbows line back up with each other like that, you could remove the air cylinder completely. Just, what the hell is that? Throw it away. Like, you could take that thing out of the ride, and the ride does not care because you're bound up on them. Each one had a little sensor to because all the gates acted in pairs, but all the pairs acted independently. Each one had a ram. So each pair had one sensor just to make sure that the ram had fully extended. And then all those sensors were daisy chained with each other to say that it was locked back at the control panel. Really good thing. Again, I like a lot of stuff Vekoma does. They do a lot of common sense, straightforward things in my mind. I would say the majority of air gates in the parks, however, are just like my first example where you had the links between the gates and you had 8, 10, however long the train is, linked up there, and then one air cylinder holding it. I would say that's probably the most common type of air gate out there. Is there hundreds of other gates out there? Yeah. Too many to talk about? Yeah, too many to talk about. There's a lot of stuff that companies do that I just haven't seen. Never would have thought of to do it that way either. It's like, someone show me a video like, hey, look what we did with these air gates, and I'd be like, why did you do it like that? Wow, that is so weird. Can you design safer stuff? Absolutely. Safety is a very funny thing though, because people say, I want to design this, all has to be safe, and we're going to do all this stuff, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, that's great. At the end of the day, if the park can design an entire air gate system for a couple of $1,000s and it be safe, they're going to do that. If you stood there and like, look, we could put 100 safety sensors on each gate, and then we can do all this extra stuff, and the park would be like, wow, that's great, that would be awesome, super safe, how much is it going to cost? It's like each gate is going to cost you $14,000 per gate, times however many gates there are on the ride. Wow, that's a lot. Like, oof, are we going to do that? And then you'd probably have maintenance standing right there. I would be one of them, and I would be saying, no, we don't want to do that. Why would you go against safety? That sounds like a really odd thing to do. Like, why would you go against something safety like that? Because that's not going to work. Be frank, right? That is not going to work. You are going to get those gates closed, and every time you close that gate, there is going to be an error on that ride. And then that ride is going to spend more time down than Lightning Rod trying to fix the freaking air gates. Nobody wants to do that. So you can overcomplicate your design easily. Like, really easy. You overcomplicate it, and next thing you know, you spend more time chasing little stupid faults with air gates and things like that than you would have if you had just gone a tried and true way and just said, yeah, the safety is good enough. What's another safety we like to use in the station? The operators. The operators are a safety, right? So a lot of rides, what's the exit gate look like? Well, we forgot to talk about exit gates. What's the exit gate look like? Typically, it's just a metal swing gate. Is it latched on a lot of rides? No, it's not. It's not even latched. You want a good example of that? Let's go back to Disneyland. Big Thunder Mountain. Okay? Get off the ride. People get onto the ride. They've just gone past their fancy air gates, right? Okay, we're on the ride. They're sitting down. They're checked. Go. Actually, I'm still exiting the ride. I'm over here standing, like, waiting for these people to get out the gate right in front of me. What do you mean, go? It's like, well, their procedures and everything said as long as all the guests crossed the yellow line that's about 2 feet away from the train, as long as they're on that side of the yellow line, send it. Okay, well, who's watching the guests? Well, actually, you have people stationed all up and down the train on that side, and they are watching the guests. Remember, like a lot of places do, they give you symbols, right? They give you a symbol like this and like this. A lot of parks, not everyone, I know they're backwards and all sorts of different stuff, right? But you've got hold the train, hold it, let it go. So as you get off and as people crossed those lines and they got on that side, the safety system became the operators. As long as the operators were on that side of the line and they said, okay, everyone from the back of the train where I am to the mid operator is clear. And then the mid operator is saying, okay, everyone from myself to the front is clear. And then that front person is saying, yep, both my mid operator and my back operators are cleared, and I'm verifying with them that it's cleared. Send the train. And that's perfectly acceptable by most things. I'll probably get a lot of comments on this video. It's like, oh yeah, we don't even use entry and exit gates on rides. Yeah, that happens too. So how Disney did theirs, where they said, okay, the exit, we're just going to visually make sure nobody's in those lines, and then we're good to go. There are plenty of parks that operate that way for entrance gates too. They said, yep, okay. What's one of the safeties there, aside from the people, is that they move the trains in and out of the station slow. And at any point in time, if anybody stops the dispatching process, those trains stop. They stop right there on the spot. They don't need a long time to slow down or do anything else. They simply just stop, and they're done. So it can be done thousands of different ways. I mean, I can't even touch all the topics and ways like different parks do things. It's really incredible. Every time I think I have something figured out, I'm like, yeah, we did this, we did that. Just what I thought of off the top of my head, like, that was pretty cool. I did that, blah, 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 blah. People come up and go like, whoa, you went crazy. When you designed that airgate system for that ride, it's like, why didn't you just tell people to stay behind the gate? It's like, well, that didn't work for that ride. It works for our rides. It's like that particular one I designed, the train was passing back through at 60 miles an hour. Okay, the insurance company wouldn't allow that to work. Our state inspectors wouldn't allow that to work. Our corporate engineering wouldn't allow that to work. And the park safety wouldn't allow that to work. So although there are parks out there, it's like, yeah, we just told them to stay behind the chain. It's fine. Just stand there, send the train. We're good. That didn't work where I was. So there's a lot of that. Again, like I said earlier on in the video, it is where you work, what type of ride it is, who installed it, what type of hamburgers they were serving on that type of day. All that stuff adds up to the final product of what you got in there. Number one thing that affects those rides, programming. Like, does the same manufacturer program the same ride every single time? No, they do not. Because the PLCs, sensors, everything else available changes every time they build a ride. And they use different stuff every single time. That changes the minute functioning inside the PLC. So the company that executes the programming has to change all that. So they've got to change with the times. So you can literally buy the exact same ride, installed, everything like that, and from the same company, and buy them right next to each other and install them. They will have two different control systems. And the way Park A installed it is definitely not going to be the way Park B installed it. So you now have two installations that are different, same ride. And then the last one, which is the one I find the most there's no consistency whatsoever, is the way that park decides to run that ride. That park running that ride may be something just way out of left field, in my opinion. I've heard plenty of people from different parks do stuff where I'm just like, you are going to kill somebody. Like, what the heck? And then I have lots of people looking at me being like, you are going to kill somebody. What the heck? Like, it's all subjective. At the end of the day, I felt pretty good from the park I was at because I had all these external people looking into what I was doing. And everyone was agreeing, from the manufacturer, the guy who programmed the friggin' ride, the state, independent insurance company, the park, corporate engineering. All those people looked at that stuff I did and they all went, looks good, thank you. And there are other companies out there, other parks out there that just be like, we installed it. And they're like, I'm like, hey, what'd you do for the safety system on that? And they're like, huh? What safety system? Nah. We just hit the go button and it goes. What happens when it faults? reset it and forget it. Send it on its way. Okay, well, I guess that's one way to operate, but okay, do you, I guess, right? Let's see. Covered air gates. We covered exit gates. We covered safety systems. Let's talk about hardware. So by hardware, I'm actually talking about the gate itself. The actuators can be run overhead to where you don't see them, and the bars come down on the gate, or the bars go through the floor, which is what most rides do, and they get to that linkage underneath. Either way, it's the same thing. Right side up, upside down, whichever way you want to think about it. They're all pretty much the same thing. The gates themselves are meant to withstand. They're typically built to a standard, but almost anything covers this standard. Which is, you need enough to where if you have like 4 or 5 people pushing on it as hard as they can, that it won't break the air gate. So you can do this with almost anything. Most rides I've worked with, you took a piece of, like 1.5 to 2-inch tubing and bent it into a C-shaped piece like this, and then took your vertical pole, welded it on like that, and then you use something like grating, wiring, something like that, and put that in the big gap opening there. I've seen it done plenty of ways where they took that big opening where the C-shape was in there, and they just put smaller vertical bars in there. Everything on those stations in America, in the areas where I worked, had to meet a 4-inch ball standard. This means at any point in time, you couldn't take a 4-inch ball and push it through the gates anywhere. I know I get a lot of people like, you could fit half an elephant through our air gates. I understand. Again, I worked in California where we did a lot of hand holding and we did not let anything past 4 inches go over there. So if you're in California and you see retrofitted air gates, you'll know what they look like, because the corner of the air gate, which used to be this nice round radius like that was like, oh, this material's coming this way, and then it nice rounds down. Oh, that's really nice. The material also had to be 42 inches tall. And so what happened was they said, oh, where that radius was in the corner, you had that nice radius right there. Well, that allowed a 4-inch ball to pass through right there. Seriously? Yeah, seriously. So what we had to do on a lot of gates, on a lot of rides, is we had to go through and add filler material to them. So on that nice round radius, there's a metal plate that looks like a triangle that's welded to that. That's to make the 4-inch ball test happy around there. Same thing on the bottom side, had to do it down there. A lot of air gates, on a lot of rides, I know they got the top right at 42 inches, but they didn't extend down. So a lot of rides, when they went in for modification, that's typically when this was done. They said, well, the 4-inch ball is the standard all over. So you can't pass it anywhere, including underneath the air gate. So a lot of air gates had to be extended down to the platform and then chopped off down there. But it doesn't have to be like high-grade steel or anything like that. You can make that basic opening, and you could put wood on the other side and just bolt the wood to the thing. As long as it wasn't splintered off or breaking apart or didn't look like you could just push it right off of there. Again, it had to withstand the force of like 4 people pushing on it really hard. As long as you could do that, you could use wood, you could use plastic, fiberglass, grating, whatever you wanted to, as long as it held up to that pressure. And most manufacturers, state inspectors, people like that were happy with it. I know, I get a lot of comments and people come back like, wow, you guys did a lot of crazy stuff out in California. Yeah, we did. But it's also made some of the safest rides out there. Because I look at some of the things in other areas and I'm like, really? You're going to let that fly? Oh, okay, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Whatever. And then I'm sure there's plenty of parks that look at what I did and just like, same thing. They do, oh, really? Ooh, you guys going to let that fly? Yeah. It's all subjective, depending on what park you're working for at the time. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I think I've covered most everything I wanted to. Short video today, not that bad, right? I like it. Not my usual, but it's something. Maybe this is the New Year thing. I do all videos under, I don't know, under 45 minutes or whatever it's going to be. People are like, oh, please don't. Some people are like, yay, finally, he's going to shut up. Oh, I don't know about that. Now you kind of know what I'm talking about. For when I sign off my videos, you kind of like, okay, I get it now. If you didn't before, now you know what I mean when I say I'm Ryan the Ride Mechanic. Stay off the air gates. Bye.